If there's one thing that has kept me in chud mode for such a long time, it's not having female friends. Now, this might sound kind of weird, but let me explain. So, growing up, I had no female friends, and while that didn't bother me as I was growing up because I just didn't think there was any reason to hang out with girls, and I had good friends as well, they were just all dudes. And so, as I got older, I started to think that as a guy, I couldn't have female friends. Like that was like a weird boundary or something that like shouldn't be crossed or that people can't do that. Like guys and girls can't be friends. Like that's like a common take on like red pill is that guys and girls can just never be friends because we're opposite sexes. And I think that this is one of the most destructive attitudes that we can have because this kind of attitude stunted me in certain ways socially because for a very long time I wasn't comfortable with and around certain groups of people or certain contexts, right? Now, you can and you actually should have female friends. The reason why, fellas, you should have female friends is because it will make it so that you are able to separate romantic desires from platonic friendship desires. If you're like me, I definitely for a long time had a difficult problem from separating being interested in a girl romantically and being friends with that person instead or being friends with a girl rather than pursuing them romantically. It was like a weird um it was weird that I couldn't separate those two ideas. It was as if I couldn't date someone, it was like why would I even spend time with them in the first place, right? But this is actually so hurtful because then every interaction you have with women, you're assessing whether or not you can have a relationship with this person romantically. And that is not healthy. Like, that's not how you should be going through the world. You should be going through the world in terms of is this person right for me? Is this person someone I want to have in my life? But in terms of a romantic context, that shouldn't necessarily be the first thing that pops up into your head every time. And for a long time for myself, it wasn't. Now, since I realized, oh, I don't have any female friends, this is kind of a weakness of mine, this is something I need to work on, I need to expand in terms of the kind of people I have in my life, diversely speaking. I don't know if that's a word I just made up, but diversely speaking. And so I took the time the past year to befriend some ladies, and honestly, this has been really good for me. It's allowed me, it's helped me to separate that romantic versus platonic friendship barrier between women that is sometimes hard for guys to do. It's also shown that if you as a young as a child don't spend a lot of time with the opposite sex, you tend to pedestalize them. I think that's why a lot of young boys are having such a hard time forming romantic relationships with girls as they get into adolescence and older is because we're not really spending time. We're not putting our children like in contexts where they can spend time with each other and develop socially. This isn't really a well thought out point, but it is like an observation I have. Um, and I hope it doesn't come off weird. But basically, by spending time with lady friends, I have been able to reframe my perspective on women in a way I didn't think was possible, actually, or I wasn't aware would be possible. And now that I've been able to reframe my perspective on women in this regard, it has made me aware of how much bullshit there is in red pill content. Red pill content is such bullshit. It's honestly probably one of the biggest scams on the internet right now, on social media right now. And the reason why red pill content is a scam is because red pill content cherry picks a few certain truths that are only true in very narrow contexts and then spreads out those truths to be blanket statements, which they're not. In other words, basically red pill content is like a bowl of soup, and the soup is lies, but they've sprinkled salt and pepper on the top of the bowl of soup, and that's like the truth. I think that's the best way I can describe what Andrew Tate's content back in like 2022, 2023 was. Because I almost fell for Andrew Tate's content. Andrew Tate was very good at saying like a couple of things that were very reasonable and were actually like pro men at a time when we really needed that kind of content, those kind of role models. And he filled in that gap. But once he filled in the gap with the truths that he was able to, or like interesting ideas, he was able to, get popular. Once you were on his content, he would start feeding you the lies. He would start feeding you big spoonfuls of the soup without the seasoning on top of it. And that is how people got hooked. Especially because those lies that the red pill content tells young men are designed to infuriate, inflame, frustrate, also kind of, poke at people's amygdalas, like their fear centers. And in a way, red pill content is triggering. Like it's funny to use that word because we usually view it in the context of like, oh, like we triggered some like snowflake, some left liberal snowflake, or whatever the term is for describing people on like the left side of the spectrum. But red pill content does a really good job at actually triggering men and getting them on board with like the right side, like the right side of the political spectrum, like the conservative, like stamping on what makes women awesome and important to our society. That's basically what red pill content's doing. And I want to be clear, I'm not here to get political. This is not a political channel. So to make that abundantly clear, both men and women have their functions, their roles, and are important to a working, functioning society. This is pretty obvious. I don't think I need to say this, but I will. Any kind of person online or content or ideology that basically tries to stamp down or trample or invalidate either side of the aisle's contributions to society is not a person worth listening to. And red pill content in this case is very good at stamping on what women contribute and how men should view women. And it's very harmful. It really is, because it's lies. How do we get out of this rut of not having female friends? Like how do we get out of this? Because I think something I see a lot online is how women are talked about in the context of dating, and like it doesn't go well. There's a question of like, well, what do I do? Like I got rejected again. If a lady is offering you to if a lady is basically friend zoning you, guys, this is gonna sound revolutionary. Accept being in the friend zone. Accept the friend zone. This is going to probably piss some people off because you might think, well, if I'm attracted to her and I ask her out and she says no, I don't want to be friends with a girl I find attractive. That is totally understandable. That's totally fine. You don't have to do that, especially if you think it would make you uncomfortable. And I also want to make clear you shouldn't be going into like the friend zone with a girl if you think, well, oh, okay, eventually I'll convince her to date me. Like, do not do that. That is so cringe. If you're going to enter the friend zone just to be like, well, eventually I'll convince her to date me. Like, you don't do that. Do not do that, bro. Your mind's in the gutter. You gotta get your mind out of the gutter. But where I'm going with this is, it's okay to pursue a platonic relationship with someone. In this case, a girl or a lady. It's not strange to do that. Like, don't let the internet or anybody else convince you otherwise. Because I can say for a fact that now that I've pursued 2 platonic relationships with ladies in my life, I would say that I'm now developing even more socially in certain regards. And the other thing is that ladies have lady friends. So if you think about it, you might end up meeting the person you're supposed to be with through having a platonic relationship with another lady. So you could set yourself up in that regard, right? That that might sound a little, 4D chess, like maybe manipulative. I don't think it is. I think it's just how things can play out, right? You're opening up the possibility for that to be the case, and that's totally okay. Be okay with being friend zoned, and be okay with friend zoning a girl you go on a date with, right? This is what happened to me recently. So there was a colleague of mine who was not returning for the next school year for whatever reason. And I felt like through the school year we had pretty good chemistry. Like, she would always like smile at me in the hallway. We would always like crack jokes. And I had a sneaking suspicion that she liked me, but I, wasn't totally sure. So at the end of the school year, I invited her out for a date, and she said yes. Eventually, we went out. It was a good time, but I didn't want to pursue it in that way. And so I said, hey, I know I invited you out. I had a really good time. I hope you did too. But actually, I just want to be friends. Is that okay with you? And she said yes. And that was awesome because then there's no awkwardness. There's no expectation. You can just hang out. And I got to invite her to a party and introduce her to another friend of mine, and they hit it off really well. So by pursuing these kind of relationships platonically, you can end up forming stronger relationships with certain people, with those people in your life. You can form more solid relationships. Don't get me wrong, like, I was honestly kind of awkward doing this. So if you think you're going to be a little awkward doing this, like, you are. Don't think you're not. But just embrace the awkwardness. Just go for it anyways, because what's the worst that can happen? Like, people say that as a meme, like, oh, the worst she can say is no, and then she says something worse than no. But at the same time, if someone's gonna say something that's worse than no, then they're not a good person, and you don't want to spend time with them anyways, and their opinion doesn't really matter, right? If someone's going to humiliate you for putting yourself out there and taking a risk, is that the kind of person you really want in your life? I sure shit don't. So take the risk, ask out those girls, be willing to get friend zoned if it works for you. Be willing to friend zone the girls that you be willing to friend zone too. Don't let it just be one way. Be willing to be strict with your standards and vet, right? If you think, yeah, this is not something I want to pursue romantically, be okay with that being a friendship. It's all good. It's not the end of the world. it'll probably help you meet new people. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If pursuing friendships with women has helped you out in your life, what it's led to, or what you've learned. That's it for this video. I hope you're all having a great start to your weekend. I'm rooting for Norway against England today, and we'll see if Holland can make it to the semifinals. If he does, and Argentina does too, I'm gonna root for not Argentina. I'm gonna root for Norway. But at the end of the day, I'm rooting for France, so I hope France beats Spain on Tuesday. Vive la France! Allez le bleu! Anyways, peace.